Get rid of him. Get rid of him. Lose him. Get out. Arteta. He's lost at Liverpool. We need another manager. It's simple as that. We should be beating Liverpool. We should be beating the best team in Europe right now. Easily, comfortably, absolutely no problem. Why on earth is Arteta still here? That was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I'll be honest. Just a little. Before anyone has a heart attack about whether I've turned on Arteta. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our TGT podcast, our weekly show where we break down the latest Arsenal game and Arsenal news. Where I'm joined by three fantastic guests and John. I'm absolutely buzzing about today's show to talk about a game in which we did lose our first game of the season, which is a shame, but considering who it was, I think there's plenty of positives that we can take, and we will. First of all, John, I should introduce you first, mate. How are you doing? We can't see you, but it's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Yeah.
That's it, yeah. He's going to be short and sweet today. That's what he's going to be like, for no apparent reason whatsoever.
No reason. There's nothing I'm doing that is violating any kind of rules or laws or anything.
Yes, of course. This is how we do things. We do things properly and we do it right on this show. And John is well, probably soon to be a martyr of that, to be honest. But other than that, it's a pleasure to have you, mate.
Likewise.
Second of all, making his return is Adam, who you may have seen, of course, on the Football Terrace and his own TFO show. How you doing, mate?
I'm very good, thank you. Very, very good.
Good. So I saw that you won at the weekend. So your socially distanced football game. Is it all socially distanced, what they're doing at the moment, Sunday League?
Yeah, sure.
There's so much illegal activity on today's show. Unbelievable.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I know, yes, true. I have no idea at all. And making a long-awaited return is Chris Carpenter from ABW. I mean, would you like to throw any illegal activities into the ring while you're here, mate? Because you may as well join the crew.
No, I've got nothing illegal at all, mate. I mean, I can pretend that's vodka if you want. It's actually water. I'm on a health kick, but no, good to be back and. Yeah, it's been a while, mate. It's been a while. Good to be back, and thank you for inviting me. And very many congratulations for your recent success as well. I know it's. I'm sure you've heard that from 1,000 people, but you haven't heard it from me yet. So there you go.
No, true. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone that's been sending the messages in recently. Really, really appreciate it. Speaking of the people that are our loyal listeners, I have just finished recording a Expert Members podcast with the one and only Adam White, who is the chief features writer at Get French Football News. So Expert Members, that's going to be available for you immediately after today's show. So make sure you go onto the community tab and check that out. There's lots of goody stuff about Aouar and Gabriel and Saliba in it, so you will enjoy it, I promise. But we are, of course, here to talk about Arsenal's defeat at Anfield and the latest information in the transfer market, which we can't escape to save our lives. It's fair to say these days, as Arsenal fans, we crave it and we love it, but it's ours, and in a weird way, we enjoy it. Adam, mate, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to go straight to the line with this. Were you expecting an actual result going into this game? And were you then shocked to see the scoreline that we ended up with?
I think the only thing that surprised me about yesterday was the fact that we scored, because I was predicting a 2-0 win or a 2-0 loss for Arsenal, a 2-0 win for Liverpool. And yeah, everything pretty much went as I expected it. I think I have to say I'm quite surprised. I haven't heard many people calling for Arteta to be sacked or saying that he's lost the plot and he doesn't know what he's doing, but thinking about Arsenal fans generally, that kind of doesn't surprise me because we do have a tendency to be reactionary. So yeah, I think, I'm not surprised, but it is a shame to see that considering what, 2 months ago, he just won the FA Cup. But hey, what do I know?
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Unfortunately, I'm a victim of having more than one Twitter account for business purposes. So I've crafted and built the TGT account over years to only follow really the people that know what they're talking about. But when you then jump onto your other account for your business reasons, then you get to see the mess, which is what you do see, unfortunately, a lot of. And that's led to part of the thumbnail for today's show. Chris, it pretty much went exactly how I kind of expected it to. We didn't get much possession. Liverpool dominated the game, and somehow we ended up getting a goal from nothing. But overall, on a scale of kind of 1 to 10, how disappointed were you at that final result?
If we're saying 10's the most disappointed and 1's the least disappointed, I would probably say around about 3 or a 4. And it's not to say that, every defeat hurts. Of course it does, but we've come a long way. I think it was said on commentary last night, and a few people have tweeted to the effect. I think a year ago, certainly a couple of years ago, we probably fall like a house of cards in that game. Particularly as soon as we lost the goal straight after we'd scored, it sort of felt like one of those games that we would have just caved in. We didn't. We stuck at it. We stayed in the game. Probably victim of, I think that the late goal there's a suspicion of handballs. I mean, it could even have been a 1-goal game. I don't like to give Liverpool too much credit because it just makes my soul hurt. But they are the better team. They're the best team in the country at the moment. As you said, they had the majority possession. They deserve to win the game. I think my only, not disappointment, but more regret is I would have loved to have seen what we would have done if we could have got to half-time with that lead. It was, as you said, it was fortunate in how it came. It was definitely fortunate in how it ended up in the net. I don't think that's Laka's finest finish. But that's the only small regret. I just wish we would have clung on a little bit. And if we got to half-time, I'm not saying Klopp would have panicked, but I felt like we could have maybe Arteta'd it. He needed that timeout, didn't he, halfway through that when that goal went in. So that's the only disappointment. But no, it is what it is, and losing to the best team in the country is no disgrace.
No, it isn't. It really isn't. And Adam, I'm glad you kind of said about that you weren't feeling particularly angry, I suppose, after the game and kind of the result that we kind of expected and most of us were sort of expecting to see. But let me play devil's advocate for a second for the sake of a lot of people that are still quite disillusioned with the result. People want to see progress. People want to see Arsenal competing with this side, with this Liverpool team, which in my personal view, is still a good few seasons off. And at that point, they will have improved, I imagine, as well. But they want to see us up there and sort of on the same pitch as them. Do you think that this Arteta style against the big teams, which has seen success against Chelsea and Man City and even Liverpool at times, does mean that when a team like Liverpool plays as well as they can do, which they did, we are going to get battered and there is absolutely no hope of winning these types of games?
I think part of that is true. I think there was a part of me yesterday that when I saw the lineup and when I think maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes I saw how we were approaching the game, I thought lightning definitely doesn't strike 3 times. We were lucky that it struck twice. And I think for all the tactical innovations that I think we've seen from Arteta thus far, it would be nice to see him sort of develop and take it a bit further. That being said, I recognize that there are limitations in this squad, and with the players that he has at his disposal, he's pretty much doing the best he can to maximize our strengths and minimize our weaknesses. But I know Chris said he didn't want to give Liverpool credit, but I do think they played excellently yesterday. I think they pressed fantastically, and that's something that even across last season we didn't really see them do as intensely as we did yesterday. And I think that was a tactic by Klopp to try and crowd out the midfield, because that's where the battle was won and lost. They outnumbered us there. So yeah, I think going forward, I would expect Arteta to do things a little bit differently. Perhaps just give us a little bit something different, spring a tactical surprise, because if he continues like this, we'll become predictable, and that is what caused us issues under Wenger and Emery.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that when you look at what was expected of this team and what ultimately Arteta's game plan was, it was to do. And I love when you talk about lightning's not going to strike 3 times, because it did kind of happen against Man City. And Man City completely kind of dominated us, especially in the first half of the game. It was only because of their lack of kind of defensive nous, which unfortunately Liverpool had yesterday, other than the goal that we scored, of course, that we were able to get in behind quite a few times against that Man City team and take them to town, I guess, at different times. And the Chelsea game was a lot more open, and Chelsea aren't on the level of Man City and Liverpool, so we were able to get much more into the game in that fixture. I suppose we were able to against Liverpool. John, kind of sticking with the theme of searching for positives in the match. If you were sort of Arteta and you're looking at what he's achieved over the last time we played Liverpool, which was when we lost up there 3-1 with Unai Emery going into the game, looking to absorb pressure, the amount of crosses that we sustained in that game and the pressure eventually telling, what would you kind of sum up the progress that has been made within that time?
Well, I think you have to point to like the mentality of the squad, that we absolutely fought till the very end, even when it was clear right off the bat that part of the game plan was to get physical with us and right in our face. We saw it against Bellerin. We saw it against Tierney. Like Mane was basically on a mission to just go and start, hacking at our players. And I feel like a long time ago that would have worked against us. And I think that when you're looking at progress, one of the things you have to look about is the mental strength that we have. And we were in the fight, like maybe not quality-wise for the whole time, but certainly in terms of where our head was at in the match. We were there for the entire 90 minutes. And I think that there's something to be said there. And also, look, Liverpool's an amazing side, and they had something to prove, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. So they didn't hold back against us, which is positive to think that this Arteta side has kind of created that chip on the shoulder of a team as big as Liverpool, that we were, I don't want to say we're relevant because we're always relevant, but it was something that Liverpool felt that they needed to overcome and tried to do it in a way that probably in the past would have worked to get in our heads physically and see if they could disrupt our game plan that way. And I don't think that's what happened. What we saw was kind of a different kind of capitulation than we're normally used to seeing under Arteta, where we had scored first. And Adam mentioned earlier that he was surprised we scored. And I wasn't really surprised we scored because I know that we have the quality up front. I was surprised we scored first. That was the surprising aspect for me. So I figured that we would be, a little bit more reactionary than we were. I think that we really sat back in the beginning and were very, very synchronized in the way that we moved. Our shape in the first 20 minutes was actually very, very, very good. And it was clear, like everyone was synchronized and on the same page. The issue came in once we scored the goal. We kind of didn't know what to do, it felt. And then it kind of broke down a little bit. But going back to your question about positives, I feel like it was clear there was a game plan there. But Liverpool had one as well. And on the day, I feel like it just worked out better. The way that we played, if we go out with that intensity against, I would say 8 out of 10 matches, we come away with some points out of that game. So that's a positive in my opinion. And I liked what I saw from various aspects of the game. I think that Klopp came out and played extremely well, knew exactly kind of where to hurt us and did. And you can't really fault him for that. They're the best team, one of the best teams in Europe and the reigning Premier League champions. So look, there is some positives there. We saw El Neni step in and do a good job, I think. I think a lot of people were kind of questioning that decision to start him, though he's played very well under Arteta. And that's a positive as well, because, look, he might not be the answer in the midfield. He probably certainly isn't the answer in the midfield. But you're going to need a player like that to step up even as a squad player. And the fact that he's got the manager's trust there and he's showing good performances will only bode well for us going forward when we need that depth running into a European competition.
Yeah, I'm really kind of hoping that we don't see someone come in with a late beard. I've heard there's whispers from Turkey about clubs wanting him, but I'm just hoping that there is going to be sort of Arteta being strong on this and keeping the Egyptian in the team, because he does provide us depth. Even if we go out and sign a central midfield or 1 or 2 central midfield additions before the end of the window, I'd like to see El Neni kept in the team, especially with the Europa League fixtures that we've coming up as well. I just want to highlight a super chat in the chat from Aya Thufuka. I hope I pronounced your name right. I'm going to note your question down, mate, and save it for the question section a little bit later on. But thank you ever so much for the donation. I want to kind of go on to the some of the incidents and some of the key performances from the game. And Chris, I'm going to start with arguably what's been the least talked about in the media, but one of the most talked about things on social media after the game, which was a possible red card for Sadio Mane. I'll save my thing at the end about this, and I'll let you go for gold first. But for you, what did you make of the incident?
First instinct was it was serious foul play. Second instinct was it was serious foul play. third instinct was it was serious foul play, because it was serious foul play. You know, I mean, things happen on a football pitch. You know, Adam will tell you, obviously, I manage a team at Sunday League level, or have done, and Adam plays Sunday League level. That sort of thing happens on a Hackney Marsh pitch week in, week out, where somebody leaves a bit on somebody. It's the old-fashioned element of the game in a park. But we're not playing in a park. We're playing in front of millions of viewers. We're playing in front of, you know, a stadium full of cameras. We've obviously got VAR. You know, I thought that was what this was supposed to come in as. And I think somebody made a good point, another show I listened to earlier on, where they were saying that it's almost nowadays that it feels to me the first 4 to 5 minutes, you can basically just murder someone on the pitch and it's fine, because the referees don't want to make that sort of decision of getting the cards out early, because it ruins the game. And if you don't believe me, just go back and watch PSG Marseille a few weeks ago, where they ended up with, I think it's 14 bookings and 5 reds. If you book a player early, or you send a player off early, you set the precedent. But the rules are the rules. And I just think that when you talk about excessive force, that's the one for me that leaps off the page. Is it a deliberate offence to, you know, is it a punch, or is it a deliberate elbow? Maybe not. You know, maybe he is going to protect the ball, but he's using excessive force, and you know how high your elbows are when you're going into a challenge. You know how much force you're putting into that sort of thrusting motion when you go into a challenge like that. That's what got it for me. And it wasn't as if the referee sort of looked at it and went, "Oh, you know, I didn't see it." And I think that's probably what saved Mane, because I think if it goes to VAR, I mean, it didn't go to VAR, did it? Because I think he was booked and that was that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what saved him. But I just wonder how much plays into the earliness of the offence. But for me, you know, I just think it's a red card. Would we have gone on to win the game? Who knows? But it would have been a huge advantage, because not only would we have been a man up, but he's one of the best players in Europe right now, and proved that on the night. So, yeah, it was clumsy, it was late, and for me, it was, you know, it was serious foul play, and he should have walked.
So it was serious foul play. We're establishing that.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you completely. I couldn't quite believe. I was sitting. I don't usually watch halftime analysis that often, because I usually use it to just take myself away for a bit of a calm down away from football for 15 minutes. But I did, just waiting to find out if they were going to talk about it. I was waiting, and I was waiting, and I was waiting, and it just wasn't talked about at all. And I found it really, really strange that it wasn't. So, yeah, go on, John. Sorry.
Yeah, really quick. One thing, like putting the punch in the face aside on Tierney, right when the game started, before the punch in the face, he has a late challenge straight through the back of Bellerin, knocks him on the floor and runs him over, like right through the back, like not even close to the ball. And right, that in itself is a yellow. So if that punch was a yellow, let's just say for argument's sake that it was a yellow and not a red, even though I totally agree with Chris that that's serious foul play and it's a red, it should have been a second yellow at that point, like hands down.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Adam, I can see you nodding. I'm assuming you were in agreement as well. Is there anything extra you think that comes into this to make it more so a red card that's been said?
The thing is, I didn't even think about the insight of it being so early in the game, and that's why he got away with it. I don't like to think that there is a vendetta or a bias, whether it be media or referee bias against Arsenal. But I can see a lot of people in the comments saying, had it been Xhaka, I don't think he would have got away with it. I mean, it gets difficult to kind of think that is the case, because Xhaka has a reputation. Yeah, I think, you know, he's got the reputation. Had he done that, he wouldn't have got away with it. And I just think, what is VAR there for if it isn't going to look at things like that, regardless of how early on it is in the game? First minute, 90th minute. That is a red card.
And I think a lot of people are bringing up in the chat box about that incident beforehand as well that John was mentioning. So that it's frustrating. I get a lot of the points from the other side of things saying that we don't know what would happen. It doesn't guarantee you win the game. Liverpool are still a very good side that I think probably still would have had more possession than us, even with 10 men on the pitch in that game from the way that we were setting up. But we certainly, I think, would have had more of a chance in the game. And you'd like to, when you think about the decisions that are being made in the Premier League at the moment, there's a lot of controversy about them. Getting something right would have made a nice change. But it wasn't that way. And for whatever reason, I don't really like to talk about bias in terms of like how we might be perceiving it, because I think if you were a United fan or a Chelsea fan and this sort of thing happened, you naturally think that the media or the officials are having some kind of vendetta against your club. It's just a psychological way that you look at things, unfortunately. So I'm not sure I'd go into that as much. But John, I have a feeling that you might want to mention something.
Yeah, and just bias or not, like why is it a problem that to ask for a little bit of consistency and competence when it comes for English refereeing in the Premier League? It shouldn't be something that we have to discuss all the time, and it's been one of the main. it's been the main story of this season, and it hasn't been that many games, and yet they cannot sort it out. Either they can't figure out the handball rule, or they can't figure out how to use VAR properly, or they're just like not making it's frustrating, and it's one of those things where it shouldn't be the center of attention, and yet it is, and here we are talking about it. And it's something that, should not be the case. And it's annoying. So bias, no bias, would we have won? Would we not have won? The fact that it's such a talking point, and not just our matches, but matches across the Premier League, is something the FA really needs to sit down and just kind of like have a good think about where they are and what they see in terms of the quality of refereeing in the league.
No, 100%. When feeling about conscious of time and want to get through as much of the points as possible, we obviously score. It was very, very fortunate had Robertson not taken that poor touch. There's no chance in hell that we get such a clear-cut opportunity. It was nice to see us hitting them on the counter. It was great to see the commentators bashing us right before we scored as well. That was also nice to hear. But after we scored, as John pointed out earlier, we kind of panicked. And the defensive astuteness went a little bit out the window, and we obviously conceded. Now, this goal kind of brought up the whole Martinez-Leno debate, which you may have seen plastered all over your social media today. Now, what I would like people to do, if I haven't retweeted already, there is a clip of Emi Martinez against Fulham for Aston Villa. Villa's ruled out offside goal. Go back and watch that, because the mistake he makes to concede there has been completely kind of missed because the goal was ruled out. But had Martinez made that mistake for Arsenal and it been Leno on the bench and Martinez in goal for us against Liverpool, I guarantee you would see the same outcry that I've seen today against Martinez than you would for Leno. Chris, where do you kind of stand on this debate between the two keepers? Were Arsenal right to sell Martinez, and ultimately, what did Leno do wrong in that situation?
Well, I was one of the people that dared to put my head above the parapet and say that I thought it was a goalkeeping error because I did. And the thing I love about Arsenal Twitter, and when I say love, I of course mean detest with a passion, is that when you bring up a point about one thing, immediately people throw 54 other points at you to justify it. So immediately what I got back was, well, Tierney was roasted by Salah. It was all his fault. I was like, I'm not saying that, Tierney was absolutely turned inside out by Salah. I'm not disputing that. My issue was that Leno had chocolate wrists. And that, he's been brilliant for us. And this is the other issue you have. The minute you say anything against Bernd Leno, everyone says, oh, you forgot how brilliant. No, I haven't forgotten how brilliant he was and is. Yeah. I'm simply saying that every player is worthy of some criticism. Any player at any time. You can be critical without saying a player is terrible. And I just felt that he could have done more, and by more, I'm not a goalkeeper. What more could he have done? I don't know. But it's just, in my opinion, his wrists were a little bit soft, and maybe I felt he could have pushed that away in real time. Maybe it's too fast, etc., and so on. So that was the main thing on Leno, and I feel like this season, so since he's come back, he's done some things brilliantly, and he's done a couple of other things. One moment in particular last night where he passed the ball literally along his 6-yard box, and anyone that's played Sunday League would have had about 18 heart attacks in one moment there, because it's one of the first things you learn at that level: never pass across your own box. Leno passed along his own goal line, and I had visions of Petr Cech, and it was all going, oh God, my head was going to explode. But I think he's done some really good things, and he's done a few things where I've just gone, oh, he's not quite up to speed yet. He's coming back from an injury. We have to remember that, and it will take him a little bit of time. I felt he did also make some very good saves last night. In terms of the Martinez debate, I mean, it's largely done and dusted. We made the decision we made. If I had to nail my colours to the mast, I was in favour of keeping Martinez. I was. I'm not saying I would have sold Leno, or I personally would have liked to have seen us keep both, even if it was until January, and then made a decision, because Martinez could have started the season as number one, and if what everybody who's a critic of Martinez had come to pass and said, well, yeah, no, he's only played 10 games, whatever. Well, that's fine. If he does what he did in the Villa game, for example, or he made 3 or 4 ricks, you say, okay, we're giving you a chance. Unfortunately, it's not panned out very well. Kappa situation. We've got no, we'll move on. If, however, you get to January and he's still performing as brilliantly as he was last year, and he's still commanding his area and his distribution's great and everything and so on, then you say to Leno, look, this is business. It's football. It's unfortunate, but this guy's come in and taken your place. So, but, if we sign another midfielder, which I'm sure we'll come on to, I probably won't be thinking about that in 6 months' time, because that's clearly why we've done this. I think Arteta would have quite happily kept both, but it's clear that we had to move someone on, and that's the decision. I'm happy for Emi. I hope he does really well. He's one of the few players to go out the front door with his head held high, and people wish him well. But yeah, to say that I would have kept Martinez doesn't mean that I don't rate Leno, would be the overall sort of thing on that one.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I think that Chris kind of hit the nail on the head there when he was talking about ideally you'd keep both, right? But I just don't think it was a realistic option, considering where Martinez was and the possibilities that he had given his performances. I think that it was clear that he didn't want to play backup keeper, which is fine. And I think that a lot of the concerns that people had over Leno that we didn't have with Martinez is something that is shown out in the statistics, and that's like this notion that Martinez has this better command of his box, which in the Premier League games that he did play for us, there was that aspect of it. If you look at the stats, he basically didn't concede any goals that came in from a cross or anything like that. Now that's not sustainable over a long period of time. You're not going to have 100% save rate from pressured crosses. But at the same time, when you look at Leno's statistics in that same regard, first of all, the data set is much larger, which I think is the key factor that went into the decision here. It was just that when you have to hedge your bets against two keepers that are doing well, you really got to go with one that statistically has done it over a longer period of time. And when you look at what people consider the greatest edge that Martinez has over Leno in that command quote of his area, they're not that far off. I think it's a 0.07 expected goal conceding rate in terms of collecting crosses in the difference of those. And when you consider the vast data set that Leno has over Martinez, I think that it's fantastic. It's very underrated, even though I don't think Leno is as comfortable looking when he's collecting crosses and things like that. I think part of that's just because Martinez is just a bigger built keeper and he's kind of stronger and things like that. It just looks a lot easier for him. I don't necessarily think that he's that much better. And even if he is, I think Leno's quite underrated in his ability to stop crosses and command his area. Falling on his neck aside from that one match. But I think that when you, like I said, Chris hit the nail on the head, you can't keep both of them. And I ultimately think from a statistic point of view, which is how the club's going to look at it, and the chance to recoup potential money from a keeper that's clearly saying he's not going to be number one, we made the right choice.
Adam, if we kind of get into the transfer side of it as well, because in my mind, I didn't see anyone coming in for Bernd Leno this summer. Like people say to me sometimes that Bayern Munich would want him. Well, I'm pretty sure that Bayern Munich have got a pretty darn good keeper already there, and he's got a fair few years still left in him, that's for sure. And Emi Martinez had a decent-sized bid from Aston Villa come in for him, and now that bid for Martinez might be the reason why we were able to sign an Aouar or a Partey this summer. And had we not have sold Martinez and kept them both, it might be a situation where those centre midfield signings don't happen, because Arsenal's financial situation is, unfortunately, that dire this summer. So do you think there's a case to say that maybe there's an emotional, psychological side to Martinez, that he was at the club for the long term? He did really well to obviously get us into that FA Cup final and had a good performance in the semi and then the final as well, and towards the end of the season. And I think someone used the word recency bias in the chat box as well, which I think is a really good way of putting things. Where do you stand on the two goalkeepers? And ultimately, do you think that in the long term, we will look at this and think this was the right decision to make?
I don't think so, Tom. I don't think so. And the reason is because I think it will be a stick that people use to beat Arteta with. I really don't think there's much between the two goalkeepers. I do think that as John said, in the short amount of games that we've seen, Martinez looked fantastic, coming for crosses, dominating the air. Considering our defenders, personally, I don't think they're that great in the air. Anyway, he made our whole defense step up a level. I think that was fantastic. However, reading some articles from sources from inside Arsenal will say that they have worries about him over the course of a season. They think that he sometimes lets his emotions get the better of him, as we saw at the end of the FA Cup final, where he was crying on the side of the pitch, which is fantastic. Yeah. But I think those sources were saying that, again, in the bigger games, they weren't sure about his ability to control those emotions. So who knows? They know him better than we do. They have access to more information than you or I do. And I'm willing to trust Arteta. I'm willing to trust the decision makers at Arsenal to make the right decisions. I think what doesn't help is that when Leno does his little biscuit fingers routine.
Get all the similes out today.
When he does that, it doesn't help because I think it's the first thing that everyone draws for, and they say, "Oh, well, we should have kept Martinez. Oh, Emi should have stayed. Emi would have done that." And it's like, okay, yes, I get it. Emi was a very good goalkeeper in the games that he played, but we can't keep doing that. And I think Leno probably knows that there's a lot of pressure on him as well, which probably doesn't help him. So if it were up to me, I would have kept them both. I would have told Emi, suck it up. You're both going to fight for the number one spot. And whoever comes out best is great for the team, because the team is the most important thing. But like everyone has said, I think there was an emotional connection, and they thought, he's done an excellent job for us. You've gone out on a high, so yeah, farewell, go do what you got to do. And if I'm honest, I didn't even expect us to get 20 million for Emi. I would have bitten your hand off for that, if it means that we can sign Aouar or Partey, which I think looks increasingly unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, both of them, of course. I think that there's still a high chance one of them will happen. We'll talk about that in a second. Then the second goal, which we conceded, was a Robertson came in from the back, and Alexander-Arnold, obviously a very, very high ball into the box. Again, Liverpool's crossing being the undoing of us, frustratingly, because I think it's actually crossing is something that Arsenal have certainly improved on defensively and dealing with these crosses that are coming in. But the shape was kind of broken. John, I'll come to you on this first. Willian, I kind of looked at, I did kind of as Chris said, putting your head above the parapet in social media, and I pointed out Willian's kind of mispositioning on this and not being back enough to track Robertson's run, and that left him completely free to then take on Leno and score. Do you think that Willian is struggling now after a very strong performance against Fulham? He didn't do too much in the game against West Ham, and a lot of people have begun to criticise him, but his replacement on the bench is Pepe, who also is struggling for form too. Is that right-hand side suddenly looking a little bit weak to you?
So here's the thing. Respectfully, I don't really know how we can come up with these kind of conclusions based off of playing Liverpool at Anfield. And I, there's nothing wrong with obviously questioning it, because I think that it's a valid question. But when you look at the context of this game and who we're playing and the opponent and how difficult it is to play Liverpool Anfield, fans or not, they've lost one game there since 2018 or something ridiculous. It's complete fortress there. It's a very difficult team, and there's still some movement around tactically as to what Arteta is trying to figure out with the side. I mean, we saw a midfield that we'd never seen start before. We saw Willian basically having what our clear-cut first strategic kind of attempt that Arteta was trying to kind of manifest on the pitch was completely out, was shut down in terms of what we were trying to do with Xhaka and Aubameyang as an outlet. So now all of a sudden what you see happen is Willian having to drop deep into the midfield and offer some support and creativity because there's none happening there. You're not getting it from Elneny. You're not getting it from Xhaka. We saw a little bit when Ceballos came on, and we saw 2 through balls through to Lacazette, who went 1v1 versus Alisson, and I guess we'll talk about that at some point, which is a whole nother story, by the way. So when you're looking at what were the issues in this game, was Willian struggling? I think the whole side was kind of struggling, and to good effect, and for good reason, given the nature of the opponent we were playing, and given kind of the relative inexperience of this partnership in the midfield, as well as with Luiz and Holding, who haven't really played together. This is one thing we haven't discussed, is that this back line that we're playing with is one of the most important. Sorry, I'm like thinking 3 steps ahead here. There's one of the most important. I have like 3 different things I want to say at the same time. One of the most important things, partnerships on the pitch, is the back line. And this entire season, we haven't had one that's been consistent. So it's not that you can't switch them up. It's just that when you're looking at the midfield that hasn't played together that much, a backline that hasn't played together that much, and now you're putting a right winger, it's clear that, look, he's tinkering with this team. And we said the same thing about Emery and Wenger eventually. It happens. This manager is still figuring the squad out, still figuring out what needs to be done, still figuring out tactically what he can get away with and what he can't get away with. He'll have learned a lot from this. And I don't think that you can really put Willian to the fire, or any one player in this particular match to the fire. As long as they were giving everything they could and fighting until the whistle blew, which they did, I think that's what you really need to look at from this match, and not drop too much, considering, like I said, the opposition and just the overall comfort everyone had playing with each other as a partnership in the midfield and in defense.
Yes, I mean, there were so many points there, but I think you kind of talked about how the tinkering part is interesting, because, of course, with Wenger, a lot of people kind of criticise Wenger for not changing things enough, staying too loyal to players for too long, not changing things at the right time in games, and changing things on the classic 60-minute substitution line. And then we had Unai Emery that changed things all the time, and changed for every single game, and tried to preempt what the opposition was going to do, and basically set up Arsenal depending on who the opposition were. And Arteta's kind of fallen somewhere in between those two, where he's willing to make changes at the right times. He has got loyalty to certain players. You look at David Luiz and why he came in against Liverpool and took Gabriel out. He has got loyalty to some players, and that's fair enough. He's got the players that he does put trust in. And I think David Luiz has certainly been one of the biggest benefactors of Arteta's arrival. And he has certainly progressed and got better since Arteta came in. A lot of people might say that Gabriel earned a right to play in that Liverpool game, and his performances against Fulham and West Ham justified a choice to play Gabriel. But then you have to think, where do you play him? Because if you play Gabriel at left centre-back, then you have to move Tierney, because Tierney's not going to play anywhere else. If you put him at central centre-back, that means you can't play David Luiz for a multitude of reasons, because he can't. I would like him to play right centre-back, but I do think he would get turned inside out by Mane. Now I look back on things that I've looked about, and I think Holding actually dealt with quite a few things rather well. He had a bit of a mare a few times, it's fair to say, but I thought Holding overall did deal with a lot of what Mane was throwing at him relatively comfortably. And when you look at what Arteta's got available to him in a back line, we want to swap to a back 4, Chris. I think that's the ultimate aim, is that eventually in the future, we want to switch to a back 4 so that we can kind of impose ourselves more offensively on games with the additional man in midfield. But the problem that Arteta's got is that he's got 2 new boys in Gabriel and Saliba that are still very young. And I know that they both cost a fair amount of money, but money, as we know with Pepe right now, isn't exactly quantifying guaranteed quality and consistency. And you've got to ease Saliba in, as we've seen. Gabriel's been given these 2 games basically out of necessity because of David Luiz's injury. And then you've got David Luiz himself, who arguably can't play unless it's in a back 3, because the mistakes he makes, the spaces that he leaves him exposed. So how do you work out this conundrum of how Arsenal eventually transition from this back 3 to a back 4? I'll give you the easy one.
Good question. Moving on. I mean, it's a tough one, because you've also got a right back who's, I would think it's fair to say, his best qualities are not defensively, and that's not to say Hector Bellerin can't defend. He's clearly got a lot better as the years have gone on, but his main strength is going forward. And I think, to be fair, the same could be said of Kieran Tierney when he's in his at-home position as a left wing back or as a left back itself. He likes to get forward. That's his quality. But I think he's a slightly better defender than Hector. And then, of course, you have to factor in the return of the Ballon d'Or winner, Shkodran Mustafi. But bless him. But yeah, I mean, all jokes aside, I think the back four probably is the way that Arteta would like to play in the long run. But you've got to kind of, as you said, you've got to integrate players gradually. I wasn't surprised to see Gabriel come in straight away because he has been playing pretty much all season for Lille, whereas Saliba had a very in and out season with one reason or another, an injury. So I think it makes sense to blood the younger of the two gradually. I think we'll probably see him on Thursday night, which will be interesting because although Liverpool put out a different side, I think just seeing him in a shirt is what everyone wants to do right now. But he's going to take time to adjust, and especially for younger players. And Gabriel, whilst young, has got a couple of years on him. And has moved around a little bit. So it didn't surprise me to see him come out of the team, that said, last night, because David Luiz, big game experience, made sense. Like you, I think Luiz in a 3 is, I feel a lot more comfortable with that. I think probably Pablo Maria is another one that when he's fit will get a lot of game time because he suits our style in terms of he's the sort of centre-back I think Arteta wants. Big, physical, imposing, but good on the ball. So it's a really hard one to judge, and I think as well, our back four or back three or back five is going to really hinge on whether or not we get one of those two midfielders that you mentioned there, and it's not the one from France, by the way. I think for me, until we get it's not so much a defensive midfielder, but it's a mobile defensive midfielder. We need somebody who is able to receive the ball under pressure in front of the back four and transition it forward into the front three. Xhaka has done brilliantly, but I thought last night showed up exactly what you don't get in Xhaka. His ability to he's very one-footed, he's very pedestrian, and he doesn't transition quickly. And that's not a fault. He's a limited player. He does what he does. But in these big games, you need more. And I think the only way we're going to see a back four is if we get that solid box-to-box athletic athlete who plays in that midfield role, who's going to protect them and drop in between them when he needs to.
I think a lot of people actually highlighting regarding Xhaka, how well he does for the Swiss national team. Now, please feel free anyone to correct me, but I believe he plays with Zakaria in kind of a deeper role to Xhaka in that Swiss midfield. And I believe Zakaria to be a more mobile player to play with Xhaka than in comparison to Xhaka. And maybe that's why we do see a much better performance from Xhaka in his national side than we do for Arsenal. And I don't really want to bring up Partey too much, but it's kind of that's why I'm so hyped on the Partey train of enabling that person next to him who is a mobile, is someone that really commits to everything up and down the pitch, does Partey. And I feel like he would be such a good partner for Xhaka. And then if you were in a dream world and able to combine Aouar with those two would really transform Arsenal's fortunes in a midfield. But I think we can agree that is the stuff of dreams right now with Arsenal's financial situation. I have no doubt if Arsenal were able to do that, they would. But it's just their capacity to with a. I don't want to go into the talks about the owner, but we aren't going to get any investment from that, no matter what the FFP relaxation is this summer. So it's not going to happen. So it's pointless talking about it. But Adam, kind of focus on the last thing before we do go on to the Aouar and questions from the chat, is kind of looking at what the front line is. Because we kind of touched on Willian briefly. I know that I can see from your face you're excited and reveling this question. But Lacazette missed a big chance in the game. And Nketiah has come off the bench a couple of times and scored. Now, you have to remember that Lacazette has scored 3 goals in 3 games, and that shouldn't certainly go under the carpet at all. He did miss a key chance in the game. His goal was, the word is fortunate, I think, with the connection that he made on the shot. And then you've got Aubameyang on the left, who, now when Aubameyang signed, Aubameyang's not a player that you sign to take you from a team who's getting top 4 to winning leagues, because that position for me doesn't do that. And that's why you look at Liverpool signing Van Dijk, because that's the type of player that takes you from a top 4 side to a league winning side. It's the defensive side of things that do. But he just seems so isolated in these big games. Can you work out any puzzle that enables a player like Aubameyang or our front line in general to get more involved in games where we are really under the cosh?
Do you have a time machine? If that is the case, if you do,
hypothetically, let's say I do. Go on.
Cool. We say, you know what? Thank you, Leo, for offering us the chance to sign Pepe for 72 million. But we're not gonna go for that right now. We're gonna look at someone else. We might take a look at Ryan Fraser and use our time machine to go back if we don't like that. We might take a look at Wilfried Zaha, use our time machine to see how that works out. But I honestly, I really don't know, because I think Lacazette does dirty work that I'm not sure Aubameyang will do in the middle. But then you give Aubameyang the 2 chances that Lacazette had. I'm more confident that he's taken at least one of them, and he's not just doing a little namby-pamby flick or when he should have been putting his foot through it. Anyway, so I don't know. But then who do you play? Because I don't know if Saka is ready for week in, week out football, and I don't want Arsenal fans to get onto him every single week, because I think we really have a player there, and I would like his development to be as slow and as steady as possible, so that when it really comes time for it to get his full potential, we get the real player we want. So I just don't know. I did read an article the other day that said there's a possibility of Arsenal playing all 4 of our front line, so Lacazette, Aubameyang, Willian, and Pepe. But that would require us moving to a 4-2-3-1, which is again dependent on us getting one of the 2 signings that we're talking about. So, I as much as we've been trying to avoid it, I really, really think it boils down to getting that Ghanaian man from Atletico Madrid. And if you gave me a choice between the 2, I'm having him every single day. Aouar, thank you very much. But let's just shore up at the back before we start looking at attacking players, because we're not Brendan Rodgers. We don't like winning games 5-4. We want to win them 1-0.
Or Emery, or whatever he said. Yeah. He'd rather win a game 4-3 or 5-4 than 1-0. But yeah, I completely get it. And on the Pepe point, I think it's important to be contextual. At the time, Pepe was on fire in Liga. It looked an absolute amazing talent that was really good. But I get your point, and I want to add context to it just so people don't take it the wrong way. I think what you're saying there is that Pepe's a great player to sign, and he was one of the best at the time wingers in the game, but it wasn't the player that we needed to be focusing on 72 million quid. I think that's kind of where you're going for it. We did need a wide player, and that's why I think you brought up, say, a free option in Ryan Fraser, or a much cheaper option in Ryan Fraser, but we needed to spend the marquee money on a Partey-esque signing to transform that midfield. I think that's kind of where your head was at.
Thank you for calling that out for me, Tom.
That's all right, mate. I just wanted to protect you. But yes, I think in terms of where we're going next with the chat is obviously to user questions. I did want to bring up the user question that we had earlier, and seeing it was very French-based, there's only one man to really go to regarding that, and that is Chris. Our super chat earlier on from Ayathathuka asked that Chelsea seemed to be open to selling a certain N'Golo Kante. Now, if he was available, first of all, I don't think that Chelsea would want to ever sell to us anything ever, other than if they're going for free, which we've seen happen, or David Luiz. But would you look at Kante as an alternative to Partey?
I mean, you'd be mad not to, just based upon what he's done in a Chelsea shirt. And I do feel a little bit sorry for him. He's very cute, N'Golo, and you look at his little face, and he doesn't look like a happy footballer right now. And I mean, let's be honest, if you were managed by Frank Lampard, would you be happy? Probably not. But he doesn't look like he. It's so funny, because when he signed for Chelsea, he was so unknown, such a sort of just a random pickup that they got. His career was going nowhere. He's in the lower leagues of French football, and he exploded into this wonderful player when he went to Leicester, and then obviously Chelsea picked him up, and he transformed the midfield and was fantastic. And then they decided, oh no, I know it isn't broken, so we're going to break it and play him out of position and try all these fancy things. What he's good at is what he was good at when he was at Leicester, and that is breaking up the play, winning the ball in front of the back four, and transitioning. That's what he does so well for France. I don't think Chelsea would let him go. It sounds a lot more like they're trying to move Jorginho on, and PSG are having a sniff around that one, which again for me is a bit of a strange decision because I still think in the right system Jorginho is very, very high quality. I agree with you. I think Chelsea are only interested in giving us players they're not interested in keeping any longer. And our record of taking players from Chelsea hasn't always been the best. David Luiz not too bad, Benayoun not too bad, but Gallas, let's just draw a line under that one very quickly and move on. But yeah, I don't think they would want to shift him to a rival because I think they know that we're looking for a player who does exactly what Kante does. So I don't think they would want to strengthen us. I do think if Kante doesn't get the play that he requests in the play or the position that he requests to play in, I don't think he'll be at Chelsea much beyond this season, if I'm honest. He does look like a sort of player who could do the move to freshen himself up, but I think you're more likely to see him move somewhere like in Italian football rather than the Premier League personally, because I just can't see Chelsea selling to any rival personally.
No, I agree with you. John, welcome to have you back again, mate. Christopher Fung says, with Brighton, Burnley and Southampton all registering an interest in taking Nelson on loan, which of those do you think would be the best destination for him and why?
That's a good question. I think that if Nelson were to go on loan, I'd like to see him at Southampton probably. And the reason I say Southampton is because they kind of have a good track record with developing these young players that has increased their value dramatically. And, the list just goes on about these kind of good players. I think Burnley is a little too... I don't think that's exactly the kind of football or environment we really want. As much as Sean Dyche, I think is a decent enough manager, and that's kind of putting it very diplomatically. I don't think that the kind of creativity we're going to need from a player like Nelson is going to be able to flourish in that kind of environment. I feel like Southampton
to a Gnabry at West Brom, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does kind of have that kind of a vibe to it. And just when you look at the kind of attacking talent that Southampton has produced, not always, but it definitely has that kind of environment that I think that would benefit the kind of player we're looking for Nelson to become. So I'd go with Southampton, and that's my reason.
Adam, the real Janice, has asked, if we don't sign Aouar and a defensive-minded midfielder, can we actually get top 4 or win the Europa League? Feel free to answer as quickly as you like.
But the answer is no, my friend. To top 4, definitely no. I don't think we're going to be able to get that at all if we don't get either of those two. Europa League, if our previous or last season cup form is anything to go by, perhaps we could be in for it, because I don't think Manchester United are on anything at all. So yeah, who knows? Maybe Europa League, but top 4, I don't.
Chris Nico F says, if we get Aouar and not Partey, do you think we'll still move to a 3-man midfield with Xhaka, possibly Torreira, who today, by the way, his agent is in Madrid right now, and Aouar? If not, what do you think will be the manager's plans with him?
I think if we get Aouar, a lot's going to change. I think a lot of the setup will change in terms of how we transition the ball, how we move the ball through midfield. And personally, I think you'll see a lot more of Ceballos, Xhaka, Aouar as a midfield 3. That might lead to less game time for the likes of Saka and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I don't think that's actually a bad thing. As much as I think Saka is going to be a fantastic player. Already he's shown glimpses of just how good he's going to be, but he is again in that bracket of young player. His time will come. I don't think we need to rush him. I'm a big fan of Dani Ceballos, and even when he was going through his rough spell, if you can call it that, last season, a lot of people are, I'll get him off, get back to Madrid, he's crap. I was like, no, this kid is really good. I remember speaking to you about him when he was at Betis all those years ago. And sort of seeing it then, and obviously went to Real Madrid, that didn't work out. So I think you saw the difference when he came on last night, and I think a partnership of him and Aouar with Xhaka slightly behind them, or El Nene, depending on who's available. I think that's probably where we'll go. But again, a lot of it depends on whether we're going to play the back 3, 5 or 4, and it depends what happens with our forward line. So personally, I think we'll end up with those 3, and and Aouar can do a lot more than just create. You know, he's a really talented midfielder. I don't want to jinx it too much, but yeah, I think we're in for very good things if we get him on board, and I think he'll change a lot of how we play in midfield, which will free up the option to play in 3, definitely, yeah.
I enjoyed your back and forth with Jeremy Smith on Twitter the other day. Jeremy has a lot more doubts, I think.
Yeah, more to come. We're going to touch on that on our pod this week. So, more to come. We're going to have a heated debate, I'm sure.
Definitely. I'll give you a chance to plug that towards the end. And we've got a couple more questions. John from Balaji, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, mate. He says, do you see a future for Pepe in this Arsenal team in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really know exactly what's going on with Pepe right now. I think it's a lot of it has to do with his confidence. And I'm assuming some of it probably is linked with his price tag and the pressure that he's under right now, as well as just kind of what Arteta is trying to figure out with this team. But he's a young player and he's a talented player. And I think that once things get a little bit more stabilized, again, just can't really look at this Liverpool game as like, all right, well, you know, that's it. Back to the drawing board. Everyone sucks. He didn't start, and therefore, you know, he doesn't have. I get the concern, and I share them as well because he's a 72 million pound player, and you know, it would be a shame if it didn't work out. But it is far, 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 in my opinion, too early to make the determination about him yet. And you know, obviously the pressure is building, and we're trying to go for top 4 and win trophies and solidify Champions League qualification, all that good stuff. And I see why the pressure's there. I'm not saying it's unreasonable, but I think that given enough time and enough in the system that would actually knows what it's doing, right? I think that Pepe can flourish still. I think he's an extremely talented player. I think that, you know, I don't think that price tag did him any justice, but I don't think that you can immediately chalk him off because he's maybe run into some confidence issues. I don't, it's too early for me. And he's too young of a player, and it's clear that he's got talent there that I'm just not writing him off.
Yeah, I genuinely think it's a case of someone who's come from a very, very different system in what Lille play to what Arsenal have to transition that. And it's just not going to happen over the course of even one entire season to do that, especially with the issues with the confidence hit you're going to take by the difficulties you'll face in transitioning as well. So, and then when William comes in, that's only going to make things worse for you. So I think we do need to be patient. I can't help but worry about the fee because it is a lot of money, and I can't help but look at who could have been signed. But
yeah, if he was a 35 million pound signing, I don't think we have this conversation right now. It's, you know what I'm saying? No. So that absolutely plays on it. And if it's weighing on us as fans, you know, yeah, it's great. He's got all this money, but it's got to be weighing on him in terms of expectation.
Yeah, of course, 100%. You know, I think in the interview he did when he joined, he said that the money wasn't going to bother him, but as does every single player with a big price tag when they come into a club. So yeah. Final question then from Ed, Easy Isle, Adam. He says, "What time frame do you see for a Saliba Gabriel centre back combo playing big games in a back 4? January onwards, maybe."
Nah, no way. I don't think we're looking at that till next season. Especially with David Luiz being where he is and being signed for his experience. I don't think we see that until next season at the very earliest. Especially not in a. Did I see big game? Yes, yeah, especially not in a big game. No way.
I think there's a chance you may see it in like a one-off now and again, like in a cut in the Europa League, but I very much doubt that is the plan. Now, especially when Marie comes back as well. I know that Arteta likes a lot, and he's obviously as well more experienced than both of those two players. I mean, they signed him permanently on a deal, and they knew they still had plans to go for a centre-back this summer, and they knew Saliba was coming back in. So there is still a lot of faith in the Spaniard, especially. So, and even though that Mustafi had kind of this rise under Arteta, the club are very, very open to seeing him leave still. So they have a lot of faith in the Spaniard, I think, and we will see more of him when he does get back fit again. So that rounds off today's show. I think it's been a fantastic one to kind of reflect on what was a disappointing result. I wouldn't go for disappointing performance still. But certainly the result was a tough one. I think Bellerin kind of summed it up well, that we kind of beat those guys twice in the last 2 times we played them, and there was a hope that maybe we could do something. It wasn't to beat. Liverpool played a bloody good game, and unfortunately we couldn't come away with the points. It's going to be really interesting to see the last kind of final days of the transfer window to see what happens. It's also going to be interesting, as Chris kind of pointed out earlier, to see if Saliba does play against Liverpool and how he performs if he does so. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Frenchman start. Thank you, John, for braving the elements to come on today's show. Much appreciated, pal.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always a great time to come on here and talk. So even braving the elements, I'm glad to be here.
And when's the next Miami podcast going to be?
Probably this weekend. I want to try to shoot for one. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I think I'm going to be able to kind of settle down a little bit, and I think this weekend should be good. Hopefully, that's. I was shooting for last weekend, but my guest dropped out, and then it was like, I can't even be bothered right now.
But it was Mike.
Like, Mike has shown up for 100% of the podcasts that I've ever asked him to do, which is
there
one. I'm just kidding. We had another one, and it was me that actually canceled it. But Mike's a great guest, and I'll definitely have him on again. You know that he's
awesome.
He's a hoot.
We can't say a bad thing about the guy. Okay, we won't go that far. Adam,
I really like Mike.
Adam, always a pleasure, mate. Tell people they can, obviously, you can find John at 305 Cast, I should have said. But Adam, tell people where they can find you and what you're up to on. Are you still doing Football Terror stuff?
Yes and no. There's a lot of people involved now, and I think there's just a few people doing their thing there. So I think it's time to let other people shine. But yeah, no, I'm there every so often whenever Terry wants me. But yeah, other than there, I'm at the Fifth Official on YouTube and at TFO Show on Twitter. So give us a follow and subscribe, please.
Make sure you tune in. You should tune in for Adam's Twitter just to see the videos of his Sunday League stuff. That's worth it in itself, for sure. So make sure you go check out Adam and his channel. And finally, Chris, as Danny pointed out right at the start of the show, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on a podcast with you again. Tell people where they can find you and what you're up to as well. I mentioned the podcast with Jeremy, of course, as well.
Yeah. Feelings very mutual. Thanks for having me, and happy to come on anytime. And I'm sure you'll be invited back into our hallowed walls with Danny as well, of course. But yeah, if you want to follow me, God help you. No, I'm usually open to chat with most rational people, but I'm at AFC Freddy 8 on Twitter. I am the host of a French football podcast. So if French football is your thing, or if you just like listening to us rattle on, then you can indeed do so. We're at French FT Weekly is the podcast I do with Jeremy, who, as Tom said, has been on this show as well. So you can tune into that. And if you didn't know, just as a third plug, Birdcamp Wonderland is my kind of my home base where I crafted my skills or lack thereof, whichever way you look at it. But yeah, you can find it on that platform as well. And we just put out a show with ex-Arsenal goalkeeper Rami Shaban just this evening. So brilliant. When you've finished here, then check it out. Thank you very much.
Yes, and not for the first time. Rami's been on a couple of times, and they've been excellent every single time. So yes, please make sure you go check out Chris and Danny and the boys over at Birdcamp Wonderland. Make sure you're checking out Adam at the Fifth Official and John at the Arsenal Miami podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed yourself here at the Gooner Talk TV, which you can find us on Twitter. We will see you again very soon. Expert members in the community tab is about to be your exclusive piece of content for this month, as I've said, with Adam White, who is the chief features editor over at Get French Football News. He's all in the know about Aouar. So as we approach the final hours of the transfer window, I'm going to get as many of those puns as I can out as possible. Then you'll definitely need to get as much info as feasibly possible. So we will see you again very soon. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, as it always is. And as always, up the Arsenal.
And watch the Tackle Big Time.